Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it?
We are so glad you are joining us for this one.
Yeah, because we are pulling you into a deep dive on a place that is just, well, it's unlike anywhere else on Earth. Imagine a country that looked at the massive, multi-billion-dollar backpacker economies of places like, Thailand or Bali.
Right.
And they just intentionally locked their gates, a place that literally made it illegal to be a cheap tourist. Today, we are talking about Bhutan.
The absolute last Himalayan kingdom.
Exactly. We're looking at a society that, until the 1970s, basically functioned without paved roads, without television, and without a single international tourist.
None. Zero.
Yeah, they didn't just casually lack those things.
Yeah.
They actively, successfully barricaded themselves against globalization. And we're breaking it all down for you today.
Because it is fundamentally an architectural and cultural preservation experiment. And it's operating on a massive national scale.
Totally.
I mean, when you look at the broader map of global tourism, almost every single country operates on a volume-based business model, right?
Get as many people in as possible.
Exactly. Get as many bodies across the border as you can, stuff them into hotels, and collect the taxes. But Bhutan looked at that model. They saw the environmental degradation, the cultural erosion happening in neighboring countries, and they completely inverted the equation.
They really did.
They implemented this high-value, low-volume strategy. It's designed to make the barrier to entry intentionally steep.
And the reason we are bringing you this Pacific deep dive right now, for you listening to us today, is a massive 2026 reality check. I mean, this is incredibly time-sensitive.
It is the most time-sensitive deep dive we've done all year.
Right. So Bhutan currently charges every single international visitor a sustainable development fee. You'll usually hear it called the SDF. And right now, as you are listening to this, that fee sits at $100 per person per night.
But, and this is the critical part, that $100 is a temporary post-COVID discount.
Yeah, that is the catch. It reverts to its full, legally mandated $200 rate on September 1st, 2027.
It is a hard stop.
It really is.
Yeah.
Unless the government suddenly announces some miracle extension. And honestly, there is zero signal in the legislative chatter that they will. You are currently sitting inside the absolute cheapest legal access window in modern Bhutanese history.
Which just completely transforms the logistical and financial math of the entire destination. Like I said, it's a legislated deadline. You cannot play the wait-and-see game here.
No, you can't. And that deadline is the engine of our deep dive today. We're going to walk you through exactly what that $100 SDF actually buys you on the ground.
Because you do get things for it.
Right. We'll explore why Bhutan's core philosophy makes it structurally alien to pretty much every other destination we've ever analyzed. We're going to rigorously audit the total daily bill, which ranges from $250 to well over $2,000 per person.
Depending on your taste.
Yeah, highly dependent on taste. We'll also break down the calendar matrix, so the best and the absolute worst times to go. Plus, we're outlining the 3 massive logistics traps that routinely ruin first-timer trips.
And we will profile exactly who this country suits and who it absolutely does not.
The honest verdict is coming, as always.
But look, before we even touch a budget spreadsheet, I need to establish the baseline reality of this airspace. You cannot wing a trip to Bhutan.
No backpacking your way in?
Not at all. If your travel style involves booking a cheap flight on a Tuesday, landing in a new city, and just sort of wandering around looking for a guest house, you will hit an insurmountable bureaucratic wall.
Yeah, they don't let you do that.
The logistics dictate the entire experience here. You have to master them before you even look at a map.
Okay, so let's unpack this floor cost, because I know people listening are already looking at their screens trying to calculate the damage in their heads.
Let's do the math.
Let's talk about the absolute minimum it takes to just legally exist inside Bhutan right now in 2026. What is the floor?
The absolute cheapest, realistic per-person daily cost to travel in Bhutan right now is approximately $250 a day.
$250.
And I want to be incredibly precise here. In the global travel lexicon, $250 a day often buys you like 4-star luxury in Southeast Asia or a very comfortable mid-range boutique experience in Western Europe.
Oh, easily.
But in Bhutan, $250 a day is not a budget option. It is the legal and practical floor. You physically cannot do it for less.
I'm having trouble wrapping my head around that number functioning as a floor. I mean, usually when someone says budget, my mind goes to a $20 hostel and some cheap street food.
Not here.
So how does $250 just merely cover the basics? what are you actually handing that money over for?
Let's run a granular data drop on that 250. It's a composite number. First, you have the $100 SDF. That is non-negotiable, and it goes straight to the national treasury.
Right, that's just the tax.
Then you have a $40 visa fee, which, we amortize across the length of a typical trip.
Makes sense.
The remaining amount covers a basic 3-star hotel room, all of your daily meals, a licensed national guide, which is mandated by law, and your in-country transportation with a licensed driver.
Okay, wow.
That 250 is just the baseline of survival and legal compliance.
So for 250, you're functionally through the door, you have a bed to sleep in, you're getting 3 meals a day, and you have a professional guiding you around.
Exactly.
But I'm guessing most people flying all the way to the Himalayas are probably not looking for the absolute bare minimum survival package.
Usually not, no.
It's almost to dial up the comfort. How steeply do these tiers scale?
The scaling is incredibly aggressive. If you are targeting what we would consider a comfortable, independent, mid-range experience, you are looking at $400 to $700 per day per person.
Per person, right.
And if you step up to the premium lodge tier, the daily burn rate jumps to $700 to $1,200.
Just for one day.
And if you are aiming for the ultra-luxury tier, specifically globally recognized properties like Amantora or Six Senses, which operate across the valleys, you are looking at $2,000 to over $4,000 per person per day.
Wait, $4,000 a day for one person?
Yes.
That brings us to the most fascinating mechanism of this entire system. Why? I mean, why is the floor so staggeringly high compared to Nepal or India? And why does the ceiling touch the stratosphere?
It comes down to policy.
Right. To understand this pricing matrix, you really have to understand the underlying philosophy. Bhutan literally invented the economic concept of gross national happiness, G&H.
Instead of GDP?
Exactly. Every other country we analyze measures its success by gross domestic product. GDP is all about throughput. How much money is changing hands, how many hotels can be built, how many bodies can be shoved onto a beach.
A volume model.
But Bhutan, officially, at a constitutional level, prioritizes the psychological well-being of its citizens. They prioritize the preservation of their ancient culture and the protection of their environment over pure economic extraction.
And it is not just some cute marketing slogan. It is an applied mathematical framework. The government uses G&H to filter every single policy decision.
Including tourism.
Especially tourism. When they look at tourism, they don't see it purely as a revenue stream. They view unmanaged tourism as a cultural toxin. The goal of the SDF is to explicitly limit mass tourism.
They don't want the crowds.
They absolutely do not want backpacker enclaves. They do not want foreign-owned mega resorts dominating their valleys. So they use pricing as an environmental and cultural firewall.
Which gives us crucial context for how we arrived at this bizarre 2026 discount window we're in right now.
Right.
Back in 2022, Bhutan completely overhauled its entire border policy. Prior to that, they had this really complex, mandatory, all-inclusive daily package rate. They scrapped that entirely and introduced the standalone SDF at $200 a night.
A flat fee.
But then, in late 2023, they suddenly halved it to $100. And people totally misunderstood this.
The travel blogs went wild.
They did. Travel blogs assumed Bhutan was caving, that they were finally opening the floodgates to everyone. But they only halved it strictly for post-COVID economic recovery.
They needed cash flow.
Exactly. They needed to inject liquidity back into the local guiding operations and the hotels. But they still wanted to control the fundamental speed of the car, which is why they passed the hard law. August 31st, 2027 is the absolute deadline.
Let's run the brutal math on what that deadline actually means for a listener trying to plan a trip right now.
Let's do it.
Because abstract policy doesn't resonate until you attach it to a real itinerary. Take a couple, planning a standard 10-night trip. If you execute that trip right now, inside this 2026 window, your combined SDF bill is $2,000.
$2,000, okay.
It is a steep tax, yes, but it is manageable within the context of a major international bucket list trip. But if you delay that exact same 10-night trip until after September 2027, that SDF bill doubles to $4,000. You are paying $4,000 in taxes before you have even secured a pillow to sleep on or a bowl of rice to eat.
It literally doubles your baseline overhead overnight. And I imagine for families, that multiplier effect is even more punishing.
The family math is entirely unforgiving. Currently, children between the ages of 6 and 12 pay a discounted SDF of $50 per night.
which helps a little.
It does, but after the 2027 deadline, that child rate rises to $100 per night. Now, children under 6 remain free, which offers a tiny margin of relief.
A very tiny margin.
But the broader point remains. This policy has a hard legislated expiry date. You are standing inside a discount window that is rapidly closing.
All of this math brings us to a central contrarian question that I really want you, the listener, to keep in your mind for the next hour as we talk.
A big question.
Is we looking at a destination that is genuinely worth this premium? Is Bhutan just a standard budget-level Himalayan destination that has artificially dressed itself up as a luxury product by slapping a massive border tax on tourists? Or is it a genuinely protected, pristine kingdom that just happens to be temporarily on sale?
That is the analytical core of this deep dive. Are you paying for artificial scarcity, or are you paying for authentic preservation?
Well, let's look at what they're actually preserving, because you can't understand the price of admission without understanding the physical scale of the theater here.
Geography is destiny.
Picture a map of Asia. Bhutan is landlocked deep in the eastern Himalayas, sandwiched right between the two most populous nations on Earth, China to the north and India to the south.
It's tiny.
In terms of physical size, it is roughly 14,800 square miles. That is physically smaller than Switzerland. And the entire population of the country is only around 780,000 people.
That geographical bottleneck is essential to understand. When you combine severe mountainous topography with the pricing bottleneck of the SDF, you achieve crowd control by design.
By design.
This is where the contrast with the rest of Asia becomes virtually violent. Look at the trekking circuits in Nepal, or the temple complexes in Thailand, or the beaches of Bali. Those ecosystems suffer from severe structural overcrowding.
Oh, it's out of control.
The infrastructure is literally collapsing under the weight of human traffic. Now, look at Bhutan's peak pre-COVID numbers. In 2019, which was their absolute busiest year on statistical record, they received roughly 315,000 tourists total for the entire year.
I mean, Venice gets that many tourists in a busy weekend.
Exactly.
It is an astonishingly low number for an entire nation.
And the on-the-ground reality of that number is profound. When you hike up to Tiger's Nest Monastery, you are not being crushed by a tide of elbows. You are not fighting a mob of selfie sticks just to look over the valley.
Such a relief.
That serenity is not an accident of nature. It is a purchased commodity. It is the direct, intended, engineered result of the SDF. You are paying a premium specifically for the absence of crowds.
And if I'm going to pay thousands of dollars for the absence of crowds, I want to make absolutely sure I'm not standing alone in a torrential downpour.
Weather is a massive factor.
We really need to break down the calendar matrix. There are very specific windows when this country shines, and there are windows that are genuinely hazardous.
Let's start with spring.
Right, spring, which runs from March to May. Visually, this is arguably the most spectacular time to be in the Himalayas. The winter haze clears, the skies are crisp, and the valleys absolutely explode with these massive, ancient, ballooning rhododendron forests.
It's very photogenic.
But more importantly, spring is when the Parachitchu happens. This is a massive, multi-day Buddhist festival, and it is easily one of the most visually staggering cultural events in Asia.
It's huge.
You have thousands of locals descending on the Zong in their finest traditional dress. The monks perform these incredibly elaborate, vibrant mask dances, and the energy is just electric.
I need to interject with a severe logistical warning about the Parachitchu and spring travel in general.
Uh-oh, here it comes.
You cannot wake up in February and decide you want to attend a festival in March. The supply chain of Bhutanese tourism is incredibly rigid.
Good point.
The number of licensed operators is finite, the number of vehicles is capped, and the number of hotel rooms is strictly limited by the geography of the valleys. If you want to travel in spring, you absolutely must lock in your booking 3 to 4 months in advance.
Wow, 3 to 4 months.
At a minimum. The licensed operators will hit absolute maximum capacity, and no amount of money will magically manifest a hotel room that doesn't exist.
That makes total sense. It's the ultimate supply and demand squeeze. So if someone misses that spring booking window, autumn is the next best target, right?
Correct, September through November.
For anyone whose primary goal is high-altitude trekking, this is your absolute peak condition. The monsoon has washed the atmosphere clean, so your visibility of the high Himalayan peaks is perfect.
Clear skies.
Plus, you get to witness the local harvest festivals, which are a bit more intimate than the massive spring events, but they have this wonderful communal energy.
which leaves the monsoon season, June through August. I will be blunt here. This is the absolute worst time to visit.
Do not go in the monsoon.
The rain is not a gentle afternoon shower. It is a relentless driving deluge. It creates genuine physical logistical hazards. We are talking about steep mountain roads where mudslides and rockfalls become a daily reality.
That sounds terrifying.
Travel between valleys that should take 3 hours can suddenly take 12, or the road can simply vanish. Furthermore, many of the major multi-day trekking routes are shut down entirely because the trails become impassable and dangerous.
See, I can already hear a certain type of traveler thinking, wait, if the weather is terrible, isn't that the low season? Isn't that technically the cheapest time to go if I want to negotiate down those premium hotel rates?
It is technically the cheapest time to secure a hotel room, yes.
Right.
But from an analytical standpoint, trying to hack the Bhutanese pricing model by traveling during the monsoon is a catastrophic false economy. You are still paying the $100 daily SDF.
Good point. You can't avoid the tax.
You are paying a premium daily tax to sit inside a damp hotel room, watching a mudslide wash out the single-access road to the 15th century monastery you flew halfway across the world to see. It completely ruins the mechanism of the trip. Do not do it.
Okay, so let's assume the listener takes your advice. They book a crisp, clear day in late April. Let's move past the calendar and talk about the physical reality of arriving.
The arrival.
Because just getting your body into this country is an adrenaline-pumping event.
The arrival is an intense logistical choke point. The Paro International Airport approach is legendary in global aviation circles.
Legendary is a good word for it.
The airport is ringed by incredibly steep Himalayan peaks rising up to 18,000 feet. There is no radar guiding the planes down to the tarmac.
No radar.
None. The descent requires the pilot to operate purely on visual flight rules, manually maneuvering a commercial jet through a narrow, winding mountain valley. Because of the severe topography and the crosswinds, only a tiny handful of certified pilots in the entire world are actually qualified and permitted to land there.
I've seen videos of this approach,
Yeah.
and it honestly looks like a video game. It feels like you could literally reach out the window of the Airbus and brush your hand against the pine trees on the side of the mountain. It's breathtaking.
The extreme aerodynamics of that valley are exactly why there are only 2 airlines that serve the country, Drunk Air and Bhutan Airlines. No massive international carrier is dropping a 777 into Paro.
Right.
This geographical restriction acts as a natural physical filter on tourism volume. It proves the country's profound remoteness before the landing gear even touches the tarmac.
And then the cabin doors open, you step off the plane, and the visual contrast of Bhutan hits you immediately. It is striking. You look around, and there's a complete absence of the visual noise that defines modern travel.
This is very quiet visually.
There are no massive illuminated advertising billboards. You will not find a Starbucks in the terminal. You will not find a McDonald's on the drive into town.
That aesthetic uniformity is enforced by national law. The government maintains a strict national building code. Every single structure built in the country, whether it is a highly secure government ministry, a residential home, or a local petrol station, must feature traditional Bhutanese architecture.
It is visually stunning. You see these pristine whitewashed walls, these incredibly intricate, hand-carved wooden window frames, and sweeping slope roofs.
Everything matches.
Everything. Even the airport terminal itself doesn't look like an airport. It looks like a traditional dzong, which is their word for a fortress monastery. You realize within 5 minutes of landing that the culture isn't just a performance put on in a designated tourist village. It is the living, breathing fabric of the entire country.
But while you are admiring the carved wood on the terminal building, you also need to brace for the physical reality of the environment.
The altitude.
Yes. The tarmac at Paro sits at an altitude of roughly 7,200 feet. The air is remarkably thin. If you are flying in from sea level in Sydney or London, the drop in oxygen saturation will affect you. First-time visitors consistently underestimate the physical toll of this altitude.
It's so true. You grab your suitcase off the baggage carousel, walk 50 feet, and suddenly you are completely winded, wondering why your heart is pounding out of your chest.
Which is exactly why a mandatory acclimatization day is structurally built into almost every itinerary before you undertake any serious trekking.
You have to adjust.
You cannot step off a jet and immediately hike up a 10,000-foot mountain on day 1. Your body will fail. Frankly, this is one of the primary unspoken reasons the mandatory guide rule exists.
Oh, interesting.
The guides are there to manage your physical safety in a high-altitude, rugged environment, just as much as they are there to manage your cultural itinerary.
That makes total sense. So you've survived the aerodynamic miracle of the landing. You are slowly catching your breath in the thin Himalayan air, and you finally meet your guide at the arrivals gate. The immediate next question is, where is this guide taking you to sleep?
This is a critical juncture in our analysis because your choice of accommodation tier completely dictates your daily budget multiplier.
Right.
We are going to break down the 4 specific types of accommodation, name the properties, and price them out so you can clearly categorize your own travel style. Let's begin at the bottom with the budget, or guest house tier.
I am genuinely curious how we define a budget room in a country that mandates a $250 minimum daily spend. Like, what does that even look like?
The numbers break down like this. In the main valleys of Thimphu and Paro, basic, locally owned 3-star hotels run between $40 and $100 per night.
Okay.
If you are determined to scrape the absolute bottom of the barrel, there are properties like the Hotel Shinadeva in Thimphu that price out at roughly $16 per night.
Wait, $16? That sounds like an absolute steal. Why wouldn't everyone just book that to offset the SDF tax?
Because it is a false economy in a harsh climate.
Oh.
From an analytical perspective, I strongly advise against scraping the floor. I recommend ring fencing $50 to $70 per night for this tier.
Why the big jump?
At that $50 to $70 range, you secure reliable, non-negotiable standards. Specifically, you guarantee private, ensuite bathrooms and, most crucially, reliable hot water.
Hot water.
Hot water is not a luxury amenity at 7,000 feet in the Himalayas. It is a basic requirement for recovery.
That's a really good point.
And you must constantly maintain the broader mathematical context here. The $100 SDF sits on top of that room rate. So your actual effective daily baseline just to wake up in that $50 bed is $150 to $170. And that is before you have consumed a single calorie or paid for your guide.
See, that reframes the budget label entirely. It's essentially paying luxury prices for highly functional accommodation. So let's step up to the mid-range boutique hotels. I suspect this is where the vast majority of our listeners will actually find their sweet spot.
The pricing in the mid-range tier typically runs from $120 to $200 per night. A benchmark property in this category would be the Jiwaling Heritage Hotel, located in Paro. It operates as a 4-star heritage property.
And the leap in quality from the budget tier to this mid-range tier is massive. At properties like Jiwaling, you get beautifully designed, actively heated rooms. I cannot overstate how important reliable room heating is if you are traveling anytime from late October through March.
It gets freezing.
The nighttime temperatures plummet below freezing. Plus, at this tier, you're getting access to high-quality traditional dining right inside the hotel, and the service is incredibly attentive. If you lock your itinerary in at this mid-range boutique tier, your total daily cost fully loaded with the SDF, the guide, your private transport, and all your food lands comfortably around $400 to $500.
Beyond the boutique options, we hit the premium lodges.
The fancy stuff.
The benchmark here is the Taj Tashi Thimphu. You are looking at a minimum of $250 to $450 per night for the room alone.
I have to say, the Taj Tashi is an architectural masterpiece. It is literally constructed to mimic the scale and grandeur of a massive traditional dong. You aren't just getting a bed here.
No, you get a lot more.
You're getting extensive spa services, high-altitude heated pools, and these massive suites with panoramic views of the entire valley. It is a spectacular way to experience the country.
It is highly refined.
Yeah.
And the total daily cost at this premium tier comes out to roughly $500 to $700 per person per day. But the Taj Tashi is not the ceiling.
Not even close.
The ceiling is occupied by the ultra-luxury tier.
This is a completely different stratosphere of the travel industry. I mean, it's wild.
We are talking specifically about the ecosystems built by Amacora and Six Senses. These are globally ranked, elite hospitality brands. Their nightly rates fluctuate wildly based on season, but they generally run from $1,500 to well over $3,000 at absolute peak.
And that is just to secure the room for the night.
Just for the room. But the underlying logistics of how these ultra-luxury properties operate in a remote Himalayan kingdom are fascinating.
It's an operational miracle.
Both Amacora and Six Senses don't just run a single hotel. They operate a sequential circuit of 5 distinct, specialized lodges spread across the key valleys: Parao, Thimphu, Punakha, Gangche, and Bumthang.
Wow.
The operational concept is that you move seamlessly between their properties as you traverse the country. They transport your luggage ahead of you, they curate private experiences, and they maintain an identical standard of five-star luxury, down to the thread count of the linens and the quality of the imported wine.
In valleys that didn't even have paved roads 50 years ago.
Yes, your total daily cost at this elite tier is staggering. $2,000 to $4,000 all in per person per day.
It is an incredible logistical flex to pull off that level of luxury in that environment. But, let's move away from the thread count of the sheets and focus on what's actually on the dining tables.
Food costs are a big variable.
Because food is a massive, unavoidable component of understanding Bhutanese culture. You have to remember their historical isolation. Because they were cut off from global trade routes for centuries, and because the mountainous terrain severely limits large-scale agriculture, their cuisine had to be hyper-local and highly preserved.
Which shaped everything they eat.
And that history gave birth to the two foundational pillars of Bhutanese food, chilies and cheese.
And we need to be highly precise about how those two ingredients are deployed.
Oh, I am obsessed with it. The national dish is called imadachi, which translates literally to chilies and cheese. It is this rich, bubbling, incredibly fragrant stew made from local yak or cow's milk cheese, absolutely loaded with whole chili.
Young chilies.
It is entirely unique. The local diet is bold, it is fiery, and it is scientifically perfectly adapted to warm up your core temperature in a freezing high-altitude environment. I think sitting down to a bowl of imadachi is a fantastic, visceral cultural immersion.
I have to push back strongly on your romanticization of this dish.
Oh, come on, it's delicious.
Yeah. You are framing this as a fun, spicy culinary adventure for foodies. I look at it through the lens of a genuine, daily logistical hurdle.
A hurdle.
What the listener needs to understand is that in Bhutan, chilies are not utilized as a garnish, a spice, or a flavor enhancer. They are treated as a primary bulk vegetable.
Okay, that's true.
Imadachi is not a plate of vegetables drizzled in a spicy cheese sauce. The chilies are the vegetables. For a typical Western traveler with an average or low capsaicin tolerance, eating local Bhutanese food is not a fun immersion. It is an immediate gastrointestinal problem that must be actively managed.
You make it sound so medical.
If you do not communicate your dietary limitations with your guide on the very first day, you are going to spend your trip in physical misery.
I hear you, but it feels like you're scaring people away from the local culture. If they can't handle the heat, they just need to speak up. The guides are incredibly accommodating. There are plenty of other traditional staples that won't burn your palate.
Like what?
Well, you have the famous Bhutanese red rice, which has this wonderful nutty flavor and is served with almost everything. You have hearty buckwheat noodles in the central valleys. You have momos, which are these delicious, comforting steamed meat or vegetable dumplings.
Momos are reliable, yes.
And in the lower valleys, you can get incredibly fresh, mild river fish.
Let's quantify the costs for those staples to build out the budget model. If you are eating outside of your prepaid hotel package, a mid-range dining experience will run you $8 to $18 per person.
Not bad at all.
A proper sit-down dinner for two in the capital city of Thimphu will cost between $25 and $40.
That's actually quite reasonable. What if I'm out walking around and just want to grab a cheap snack off a cart? Like, what's the street food situation?
That is another area where Bhutan differs from the rest of Asia. Street food culture is virtually non-existent.
Really? None at all.
You are not going to find rows of vendors grilling skewers on the sidewalk. However, if you are walking down Norzenlam, which is the main artery in Thimphu, you can find local bakeries offering pastries and basic snacks for around $1 to $3.
Oh, okay.
But if your broader strategy is to cut your daily costs via self-catering, the logistics are exceptionally tight.
Though I will say, visiting the Centenary Farmers Market in Thimphu on a weekend is a brilliant experience.
It's good for observation, sure.
It is a great way to observe the actual agricultural rhythms of the country. You can also stop by the Bhutan natural stores to see what the locals are actually buying.
The baseline prices for domestically produced goods are low. Local red rice runs about $1.50 per kilogram, and local eggs are roughly 30 cents each.
Super cheap.
But the moment you crave an imported familiar product, say a specific brand of coffee or foreign chocolate or imported fruit, the math changes instantly.
It gets expensive fast.
Those items carry a 30 to 50% premium over what you would pay across the border in India. This is simply due to the exorbitant fuel and transport cost of trucking them up the mountain passes. If you plan to supplement your hotel meals with familiar groceries, you need to budget an extra $15 and $20 per day.
And while we're on the topic of walking through local markets and interacting with people, we absolutely have to cover the etiquette, the rules of respect.
Crucial.
Bhutan is a deeply traditional, polite society, and behavioral expectations are taken very seriously. When you visit a dzong or any religious site, you must dress modestly. That means shoulders and knees must be completely covered, regardless of how hot it is outside.
They will not let you in otherwise.
And you will be expected to remove your shoes unprompted when entering the inner temples.
You must also exercise extreme situational awareness regarding photography. You absolutely must not photograph monks, interior altars, or religious ceremonies without securing explicit, clear permission first.
Just ask your guide.
Furthermore, you never, under any circumstances, enter a dzong or a monastery without your official guide present.
Speaking of the guide, since they are with you constantly, tipping is a standard expectation. You should budget $10 to $15 per day to tip your private guide, and perhaps slightly less for your driver.
It's part of the daily math.
And I want to add some color to this. If you show baseline respect for their customs, the warmth you receive for the Bhutanese people is incredible. It is genuine. It is not that performative transactional hospitality you sometimes feel in heavily touristed areas where they are just buttering you up for a sale.
We have now successfully isolated all the individual financial variables. We have the SDF tax, the 4 hotel tiers, the dining costs, the imported grocery premiums, and the tipping expectations.
Look at all the pieces.
Now we need to synthesize these moving parts and construct the final total daily budget scenarios. Let's make this highly actionable for the listener trying to figure out where they fit.
Let's run the scenarios. Walk me through the absolute minimum.
Budget scenario 1 is the low budget. We calculate this rigorously at $250 to $300 per day.
Okay, lay out the numbers.
The mathematical breakdown is as follows. Your $100 SDF tax, $50 for a functional guest house room, $25 for basic meals, $40 as your fractional share for a guide operating a shared group tour, $15 for shared minibus transport, and $20 for entry fees to basic activities.
And that gets you by.
This equation works. It legally gets your body across the border. But it is entirely functional, it lacks privacy, and it is very thin on physical comfort.
Which naturally leads us to the mid-budget, which I genuinely believe is the optimal sweet spot for experiencing this destination properly.
I agree with that.
We're looking at $450 to $600 per day. Here is how that budget allocates. $100 for the SDF, $150 for a beautifully appointed boutique hotel with reliable heating, $50 for high-quality meals, $80 to cover the exclusive use of a private guide and a private driver, $60 for robust activities, and $30 for incidentals and tips.
It's a very balanced approach.
At this specific price point, you unlock total independence. You are highly comfortable, and you achieve deep, personalized immersion because the guide is focused entirely on answering your questions rather than managing the dynamics of a group of strangers on a minibus.
Scenario 3 is the high budget. This operates at $700 to $1,200 per day.
Wow, okay.
That encompasses your $100 SDF, a $300 to $500 premium lodge room like the Taj Tashi, $80 for high-end dining, $100 for your private guide operating a luxury SUV, and $100 a day for premium exclusive experiences.
What kind of experiences?
At this tier, you are paying for access. Think private, after-hours monastery tours, helicopter transfers between distant valleys to save driving time, or private archery lessons with local experts.
Now, what about the slow travel movement? We cover so many destinations where people want to rent an Airbnb for a month and just work from their laptops. How does the digital nomad reality play out in a place like Thimphu?
I will bluntly dismantle the digital nomad fantasy right now.
Go for it.
It does not exist in Bhutan, and the government has no intention of accommodating it. There is no standard digital nomad visa. There is no freelancer permit.
Right.
Remember the mechanics of the $100 SDF? It applies to every single night you are physically inside the borders, regardless of whether you're hiking a mountain or staring at a spreadsheet in a cafe.
It ticks up every night.
Therefore, a 30-night stay generates a baseline tax bill of $3,000 just for the legal right to exist in the country. If you run the mid-range math for a solo digital nomad attempting to stay for a month, the total cost scales to roughly $13,500.
That is insane.
This is a deep immersion, high-intensity destination with a hard financial ceiling. It is absolutely not a base camp for remote workers trying to geo-arbitrage their rent.
Right now, I guarantee someone listening is looking at their screen, running that 13,500 monthly figure in their head, and their jaw is just on the floor. It is a staggering amount of money.
It's not built for nomads.
But let's pivot to a much more common scenario, the family calculation. Let's map out a family of 4, 2 adults, and 2 kids aged 8 and 10, planning a standard 7-night trip.
Let's execute the math on that family unit. The SDF alone is punishing. You have $1,300 for the 2 adults at the full rate, plus $700 for the 2 children at the discounted $50 rate.
Okay, so that's
That is $2,100 in unrecoverable taxes.
just to get in.
At a mid-range hotel requiring 2 adjoining rooms or a family suite at roughly $200 a night. Allocate $100 a day to feed the 4 of them. Add a larger guide and a larger transport vehicle at $150 a day.
Where does that leave us?
The final total cost for that single one-went family trip lands between $6,450 and $7,500.
That is a massive capital investment for a 1-week family vacation. But I have to remind the listener of the entire premise of this episode.
The deadline.
Yes, the deadline. If you delay and book that exact same family trip after the September 2027 deadline, the SDF portion of that bill doubles. Executing this trip right now physically saves that family $2,100 compared to waiting.
The financial savings are clear, but budgeting the capital is only half the battle.
There too.
The other half is successfully navigating the massive bureaucratic planning hurdles that routinely trip up independent travelers. Let's analyze the 3 specific named logistics traps that you absolutely must circumvent.
These are so important.
These are high-stakes traps. If you fail to navigate these, you either forfeit a significant amount of money or you are denied entry at the airport.
Okay, crap number 1. The Piro Airport booking cascade.
The underlying facts. As we established during the aviation breakdown, only Druk Air and Bhutan Airlines operate flights into Paro. Furthermore, they only connect via a highly restricted handful of regional hubs, specifically Kolkata, Delhi, Kathmandu, Bangkok, and Singapore.
You can't just fly direct.
No. The pricing on these routes is monopolistic and rigid. A return flight originating from Sydney or Melbourne connecting through a hub will cost between $1,100 and $1,600.
Okay, what about Europe?
From London, a return sequence is $800 to $1,200. From Toronto, expect to pay $1,400 to $1,900 for the complete return sequence to Paro.
See, if I'm sitting in London, my natural instinct is to just open a flight aggregator, punch in Paro, and look for a deal 2 weeks before I want to fly. Why won't that work?
Because that is the psychological trap. Travelers are conditioned to treat Bhutan like it is a standard, high-volume Asian hub like Bangkok or Ho Chi Minh City. They assume they can secure a hotel on a booking app and then grab a cheap, last-minute budget flight. You cannot. The flight slots on those 2 tiny airlines are severely capped by the physical number of planes they own. They sell out months in advance.
So how do you fix it?
The fix is that you must treat the booking process as a synchronized cascade. You must secure your flight seats, confirm your licensed operator, and wire your SDF payment simultaneously, a minimum of 3 to 4 months out. You cannot piecemeal this itinerary together on a whim.
Which flows perfectly into Trap 2. If I can't just book this on an app, who's actually processing my SDF payment and securing my visa?
That is Trap 2, the licensed operator requirement. The legal reality is that utilizing a government-licensed local operator is mandatory for all international tourists, with the sole exception of Indian nationals. There is no mechanism for independent backpacker-style travel.
So how are people getting scammed? Like, what's the trap?
The trap lies in the proliferation of unlicensed third-party agents on the internet. Because travelers know they have to use an operator, they do a web search, and find slick websites claiming to be official Bhutanese travel agents.
And they just hand over the money.
Exactly. The traveler wires thousands of dollars in deposits to these phantom agents who then fail to register the booking with the official Tourism Council of Bhutan. The money vanishes into a foreign bank account, and the traveler arrives at the airport with no visa and no legal right to board the plane.
That is a nightmare scenario. How do you verify you aren't sending $5,000 to a scammer?
The fix is rigorous verification. You must cross-reference any operator you engage via the official government portal at tourism.gov.bt.
Right.
Crucially, you must demand written, verifiable confirmation of your processed $100 SDF payment and your approved e-visa before you wire the final balance of your trip.
Got it. And finally, trap 3, the August 2027 SDF cliff. We've touched on this repeatedly, but we really need to explain exactly why travelers are getting this wrong.
The facts. The $100 discount absolutely terminates on August 31st, 2027. A couple taking a 10-night trip in autumn 2027 will pay $4,000 in SDF instead of the $2,000 they would pay today. The psychological trap here is rooted in how travelers observe other global governments.
Yeah, people see a country announce a tourist tax, then the local hotels complain about lost revenue, and the government immediately caves and extends the discount to keep the numbers up.
Exactly. Travelers assume Bhutan will blink. But based on all available legislative data as of May 2026, they will not blink. Their entire economic model is predicated on restricting volume.
They don't want the volume anyway.
Exactly. The fix is simple. Do not play chicken with the Bhutanese government over this policy. Target spring 2026 or spring 2027 and lock in your booking and your SDF payment before the end of 2026 to legally guarantee you fall inside the discount window.
Okay, assuming you have navigated the booking cascade, you've dodged the scammers, and you've paid your taxes, let's focus on the actual physical reality of being on the ground.
The on-ground experience.
Let's talk about safety and well-being, because this is a fascinating aspect of the destination. The physical safety profile of Bhutan is phenomenal. They boast an exceptionally low violent crime rate.
Statistically, it ranks as one of the safest sovereign nations on Earth. And this is where I want to reframe how independent travelers view the mandatory guide rule.
Okay, how so?
Backpackers often chafe at the idea of a guide. They view it as a restrictive babysitter. But in the context of the Himalayas, the guide is a vital, multi-tiered safety net. You are employing a local professional who understands the treacherous, unpredictable road conditions, who is trained in recognizing the early onset of high-altitude pulmonary edema, and who knows exactly how to navigate complex local religious customs without causing offense.
I think that's a brilliant way to look at it. And the feedback from solo travelers, particularly solo female travelers, is incredibly consistent. They report feeling entirely at ease walking around.
The dynamic is very different.
It is so refreshing. In many parts of the world, a mandatory guide is essentially a captive sales funnel. They spend the whole day dragging you into their cousin's carpet shop or a jewelry store to secure a kickback commission.
That is very common elsewhere.
But that aggressive hustle culture just doesn't exist here. They are credentialed professionals. You spend the day discussing complex Buddhist philosophy or the history of the monarchy, and they do it without constantly trying to upsell you on souvenirs.
However, while your physical security from street crime is virtually guaranteed, we must address the stark medical realities of the region.
Yeah, this is important.
The Jigme Dorji Wangchuk National Referral Hospital in Thimphu is perfectly adequate for basic routine medical needs, setting a sprained ankle from a hike or treating a minor gastrointestinal infection.
From the chilies.
Possibly from the chilies, yes. But if you suffer a severe, complex trauma or a catastrophic medical emergency, the harsh reality is that the local infrastructure cannot support you. You will require an immediate medical evacuation out of the country, typically via a specialized flight to advanced facilities in Bangkok or Delhi.
Which means relying on the standard travel insurance policy attached to your credit card is a massive gamble.
It is a reckless gamble. Upgraded travel insurance with comprehensive high-limit medical evacuation coverage is absolutely essential. Do not fly into a remote Himalayan valley without it.
Definitely.
You need to proactively budget roughly $80 to $150 for a robust 2-week policy that explicitly covers high-altitude evacuation.
That altitude is precisely why you might need that evacuation. We've mentioned it, but the numbers really bear repeating. Paro sits at 7,200 feet. Thimphu is slightly higher at 7,700 feet.
It is a significant elevation.
And if you take the very standard driving day trip over the Dachala Pass to see the 108 stupas, you are cresting at 10,000 feet. And if you attempt a multi-day camping trek, like the famous Druk Path, You will be hiking and sleeping at over 13,000 feet.
Which triggers a severe, non-negotiable warning for anyone with underlying health conditions. If you suffer from cardiac issues, respiratory problems, or severe anemia, the reduced oxygen saturation is a critical risk factor.
That's serious business.
This physiological reality is exactly why the 48-hour acclimatization period in the lower valleys is strictly enforced by the guides before they allow you to attempt any strenuous vertical hiking.
So, you've acclimatized properly, you're perfectly safe, you've paid your premium daily fees. Let's talk about the payoff. What is actually going to leave you breathless in a good way, and what might genuinely leave you feeling let down? Let's start with the absolute best moments. I will lead here because I am deeply passionate about these specific experiences. Number one, undeniably, is Tiger's Nest. Parotak Singh. It is one of the few places on Earth that is exactly as breathtaking in reality as it is in the highly edited photos.
Though we must clarify that the logistics of physically reaching it are highly demanding.
Oh, they are brutal. This is not a drive-up viewpoint. The monastery is literally clinging to a sheer, vertical cliff face at 10,000 feet above sea level.
It's quite a climb.
To get there, you have to execute a grueling 3-hour hike that involves an 1,800-foot vertical elevation gain. The air is thin, your lungs are burning, your legs feel like lead.
It tests you.
But the visual reveal is astonishing. You are hiking through this dense pine forest, you clear the final rocky ridge, and suddenly you are looking across a massive gorge at this impossibly beautiful, pristine white monastery suspended on the rock. It feels like gravity shouldn't allow it to exist. It is, without exaggeration, one of travel's greatest rewards. It justifies the entire flight and the SDF tax in one single moment.
It is an undeniable masterpiece of structural engineering and location scouting.
And speaking of monumental architecture, the Kunakadzong is another absolute peak moment. It is a massive, sprawling 17th century fortress built strategically at the exact confluence of two rushing glacial rivers.
The setting is perfect.
If you visit in the winter, the stark white walls against the deep blue sky are stunning. But if you time it right and go in spring, the entire fortress is surrounded by these massive, blooming, purple jacaranda trees. When you walk across the wooden cantilever bridge to enter it, you feel completely severed from modernity.
Beyond the static, preserved architecture, we must account for the living cultural events.
Yes, archery. It is the national sport. It is an absolute obsession, and you absolutely have to see it. It only costs about $20 to $40 to get your guide to arrange village-level access to a match.
It's very unique.
And you have to wipe away any preconceived notions of what archery is. It's not a bunch of guys standing quietly in a field shooting at a target. The targets are incredibly far away, and the entire event is chaotic and joyful.
This is very loud.
It involves vibrant singing, synchronized team dancing every time a target is hit, and this hilarious, highly theatrical trash talk commentary where they taunt the opposing archers. It is incredibly raw and full of life.
Now we must pivot the analysis to the honest disappointments. Because at $250 to $1,000 a day, expectations are sky high, and there are several areas where the reality falls short. We need to be blunt. First, I am going to analytically tear down the capital city, Thimphu.
Oh, come on. You can't write off the entire capital.
I can, and I will. For a significant percentage of premium travelers, Thimphu is a massive letdown. It suffers from rapid, uninspired concrete construction. The vehicular traffic is getting increasingly congested, and the core streets feel far too commercialized.
It's just developing.
But it completely shatters the carefully cultivated illusion of the pristine, untouched, mystical Himalayan valley that travelers are paying for. My strict logistical advice: spend exactly 1 day maximum in Thimphu to check off the mandatory cultural boxes, and then immediately push out to the rural valleys like Gamti or Bumthang.
I see the concrete, but I completely disagree with your conclusion here. I think Thimphu is essential precisely because it shatters that postcard illusion.
How is that a good thing?
It provides a fascinating real-time look at an ancient culture actively, messily grappling with 21st century modernity.
Yeah.
Sitting at an intersection and watching a monk in traditional red robes furiously texting on a smartphone, or seeing how the government mandates traditional carved wooden facades on modern concrete apartment blocks. It is incredibly interesting sociology. I argue it is absolutely worth 2 days of your itinerary to understand the real, modern Bhutan, rather than just the curated museum version.
We will have to agree to disagree on the value of observing concrete apartment blocks.
Fair enough.
But here is a disappointment that is rooted in pure physiological reality. Food fatigue. As we established during the culinary breakdown, the menus at the budget and mid-tier hotels lean heavily on a repetitive rotation of chilies, cheese, and rice.
Which can get old.
After 3 or 4 days, that highly specific, intensely spicy flavor profile becomes exhausting for Western palates. The logistical fix here is simple and necessary. Pack your own supplementary snacks. Bring high-quality protein bars or familiar trail mix to break the monotony.
Another genuine frustration for the modern connected traveler is the digital infrastructure. The internet is highly patchy the moment you leave the main cities, and if you are out on a multi-day trek, it is entirely absent.
Do not rely on it.
You need to manage your expectations aggressively. Do not promise your clients or your boss that you will dial into a crucial Zoom call from the Tunaka Valley. The bandwidth simply will not support it.
So if the patchy digital infrastructure, the potential for food fatigue, or the immovable $250 a day financial floor are absolute deal breakers for your personal travel style, where else should you deploy your capital? Let's transition to the regional alternatives.
Let's do it.
We have isolated 2 specific named alternatives, and we will benchmark them with a strict USD comparison.
Alternative 1 is the giant in the room, Nepal, specifically the Annapurna circuit.
The financial facts on Nepal are compelling. A mid-range, independent trekking experience in Nepal will cost you roughly $40 to $80 per day, completely all in. Compare that $80 ceiling to Bhutan's $250 floor.
Huge difference.
Furthermore, the aviation logistics are vastly cheaper and simpler. A standard flight from Sydney to Kathmandu will run around $850 to $1,100, and you have dozens of airlines to choose from.
The cost savings are massive, but the trade-off is equally massive. Nepal possesses arguably the most incredible mountain scenery on Earth, but it also suffers from crushing crowds.
It is very busy.
In peak season, the famous trails are literally packed bumper to bumper with trekkers. The urban staging areas like Kathmandu are incredibly chaotic, polluted, and overwhelming. Nepal is fantastic if your goal is purely budget-driven, high-altitude athletic trekking, but it completely lacks the managed, pristine, quiet serenity that you are buying in Bhutan.
Which brings us to Alternative 2, Sikkim, India. This is a highly fascinating geographical comparison because Sikkim directly borders Bhutan.
Right next door.
You can access it by flying into major Indian hubs like Delhi or Kolkata and then transferring up to Gangtok. The daily operation and cost is roughly $60 to $100. There is no punishing SDF tax, and there is no legal requirement to hire a mandatory guide.
Total freedom.
You are entirely independent, and the landscape, dominated by the staggering presence of Mount Kanchenjunga, is undeniably world-class.
But again, we have to look at the trade-off. If it's next door and it's cheap, why isn't everyone going there instead?
Because you are dealing with standard, strained Indian state infrastructure. You will face heavy, chaotic peak season crowds driven by massive domestic Indian tourism. And crucially, it completely lacks that strict national aesthetic uniformity. There are no building codes mandating traditional architecture. It is a sprawl of modern development. Sikkim is the intelligent, highly capable budget alternative for the region, but let's be absolutely clear, it is not a substitute for the curated authenticity of Bhutan.
All right. We have covered the staggering geography, the complex aviation physics, the deeply philosophical pricing model, the logistical traps, and the regional competitors. Let's bring all of these variables, facts, and prices together for the final verdict.
Is it worth it?
Let's run the matrix. We're going to debate the 5 specific traveler profiles.
Profile 1, the budget solo traveler.
Not worth it. It is structurally hostile to this demographic. A $250 daily minimum floor combined with legal restriction of being tethered to a mandatory guide completely kills the spontaneous flexibility and economy that solo budget travel requires. Take your money and go to Nepal.
Profile 2, the couple on a 10-day cultural journey.
Unambiguously, resoundingly worth it. Yes, that trip will cost roughly $10,000 total right now. That sounds incredibly steep, but the math is undeniable. Executing that trip today saves you $2,100 over the post-2027 cost of $12,100.
You've captured the discount window.
Exactly. If you have the capital, this is the correct strategic call for 2026 or spring 2027.
Profile 3, the family of 4 with school-aged children.
I rate this as conditionally worth it. You are looking at a massive capital outlay of $6,500 to $7,500 all in for a single week.
That's a lot.
But from an experiential standpoint, Kids actually love the visceral nature of the country, the loud archery tournaments, the wide-open nature, exploring the massive fortresses. And again, you physically save $2,100 if you book before August 2027. If the family wallet can absorb the blow without stress, go.
Profile 4. The luxury traveler aiming for the Amancore or Six Senses tier.
Absolutely unequivocally worth it. If you are operating at $2,000 to $4,000 a day, the $100 SDF tax is a rounding error. It is completely irrelevant to your budget.
It doesn't matter to them.
Not at all. What you are paying for is exclusive access to one of the absolute last genuinely managed, pristine, low-volume travel environments left on the planet.
And finally, profile 5. The digital nomad.
Completely not worth it.
Ah,
There is no nomad visa. You face a punishing $100 a night tax just for the privilege of sitting in a laptop, and the Wi-Fi will constantly drop your calls. Bhutan is a final destination meant for deep observation. It is not a base for remote work.
So if we pull back from the specific budgets and connect this entire matrix to the bigger picture, Bhutan raises a vital existential question about the future trajectory of global travel itself.
It really does. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder long after you finish this deep dive. Right now, we are watching the explosive rise of intense, destructive over-tourism globally. Look at Venice, finally being forced to charge entry fees just to stop the city from sinking under the weight of day trippers.
Or Japan.
Look at Kyoto, literally banning tourists from walking down geisha districts because the harassment got out of control. In that context, Bhutan's gross national happiness philosophy and their massive strict SDF tax model might seem extreme, exclusionary, or unfairly expensive to us right now.
But what's ahead?
Look at the world 10 years from now. Will Bhutan still be seen as this weird, expensive, isolated outlier? Or will they be recognized as the brilliant pioneers of a system that every highly desirable, beautiful country eventually has to adopt? Are they just the first country to realize that eventually you have to gate your borders and charge a premium just to protect your soul?
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.